Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is proposing fundamental reforms to Indigenous affairs, upending a system of governance that has been in place for the better part of this country's 150-year history. The federal Liberal government will split Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, INUC, into two separate ministries, some 20 years after the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples recommended such a division. Trudeau promised new legislation in the near term to formally begin the process of splitting a ministry that has more than 4,500 employees scattered across the country and a budget in excess of $9 billion. There's a sense that we've pushed the creaky old structures at INUC as far as they can go, Trudeau said Monday in announcing changes to the department. Despite the Prime Minister's lofty goals, some experts warn fundamental reforms of this sort could actually lead to more headaches. In terms of practical outcomes, I think it might actually have a negative effect, Christopher Alcantara, an expert on Indigenous settler relations at Western University, said in an interview with CBC News. It's going to complicate decision-making because now you have two ministers competing for resources around the cabinet table. Instead of an integrated process, you're going to have silos, little empires that guard their resources. I worry about this. I worry about the lack of coordination, he said. Jane Philpott will lead Indigenous Services, a department that will oversee programs for Status Indians, including welfare, education, child and family services, housing, long-term water advisories and, eventually, the provision of health care. Philpott will oversee a department that has long been beset with governance issues and complaints from Indigenous peoples that it is paternalistic and colonialist in nature. We're undoing generations of dysfunctional and discriminatory structures, the outgoing health minister said Monday. We don't want to pretend that this is going to be done overnight. Carolyn Bennett, who will take the reins at Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, is tasked with settling outstanding comprehensive land claims. There are nearly 100 such deals in the pipe with various degrees of completeness, clearing a backlog of grievances at the specific claims tribunal and generally fostering a new era of self-governance. She recently negotiated a landmark deal on education with the Anishinaabe Nation in Ontario, a devolution the government hopes to replicate in other jurisdictions. Bennett will lead the government's continued push to dismantle the Indian Act, helping more communities opt out of provisions that date back to the 19th century. My job is to make sure there's a whole-of-government approach, Bennett said. The ultimate goal is self-determination. Hayden King, a professor of Indigenous governance at Ryerson University, said the last thing Indigenous peoples want is another layer of bureaucracy and twice as much obfuscation. We want to see less of the paternalism that already exists, not see it multiply. Bureaucrats have been accused of dragging their heels on the Child and Family Services file despite 3 non-compliance orders from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal.